Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a big pleasure for me to welcome all of you here at this book presentation. And the biggest pleasure is actually to welcome Shubhangi Swarup, the author of the book Latitudes of Longing, or Breiten, des Verlangens, as it is translated into German. I just finished reading this book and I'm still absolutely thrilled, I must say, because it's a big journey through time and through Asia. I would say it starts at the Andaman Islands, it goes to Myanmar, it goes to Kathmandu, it ends with an old couple in the hills, the Himalayas near Kargil. And it's a fascinating book for me. It's also very fascinating that below all the characters in the book, there's always Mother Nature under it, I would say, in my simple language. But I wish all of you a very interesting evening. We have Simone Schröder as a moderator of this evening, Milena Adam, who will read some of the parts in German. And I would like to welcome all of you again. Also, some of the audience are online. That's why we have these cameras here, so that more people can see it who are not in the room today. So have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Why don't you?
Yeah, a warm welcome also from my side to the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, and thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful sunny day. I said, when Shubhangi sent me an email last week and said she had arrived in your sunny city, you said, and I was wondering, because it was the first day of sunshine, and I think you just brought the sunshine.
Oh, thank you.
So a warm welcome to Shubhangi Swarup, first of all. So my name is Simone Schröder. I'm the program director of the International Literature Festival here in Berlin. And last year I invited Shubhangi to our festival, and sadly she couldn't come because she had just had a small baby. And so I was more than happy to when I heard that Shubhangi could come here today, and that I have the occasion to talk to her today. And with us is also Milena Adam, the translator of the novel. The book has come out in German last year with Zurich-based Kommode Verlag. Annette Beger is also here, your editor in Switzerland.
Yes.
And you have just arrived from a trip to Zurich where you've done a reading. So how has your trip been so far?
Well, it's been more than I could imagine, to be honest. This book came out just before the pandemic, and even though it did really well in India and now it's translated in 17 languages, I really couldn't get to experience the joy of traveling to other cultures and interacting with readers. I had 2 kids, and the pandemic still lives in my country, I think, actually. We still, I lead quite an isolated existence because of COVID. So this feels like I've just stepped out into this beautiful big world, and I had forgotten I was a writer. So thank you for reminding me. It sounds, so frivolous, but thank you for reminding me that I'm a writer and I wrote this book.
Yeah, glad to. So we've got about an hour for our conversation and reading tonight, and then we will open the floor for all your questions, so there will be plenty of time for you to ask questions. Shubhangi, you're a writer and an educator. You have your first language is Hindi, so you didn't grow up.
My mother tongue.
Your mother tongue, but you've also written a little bit in Hindi. I've
written a play. After this book, I wrote a play that is in Hindi about female vampires.
That sounds so fascinating.
Hindi is better suited for such subjects. Yes.
We will maybe later talk a little bit about language policies, about the publishing world in India.
Yes.
I think that's so fascinating. Also, language
and
politics.
Internationally too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but the novel that we're going to talk about today, Latitudes of Longing, you've written that one in English, and
Yes.
You've worked for 7 years on this novel.
Yes.
To write it. And
Yes.
was it always clear to you that it would be your first novel, your debut?
No, it wasn't. And I think anyone who aspires to write or be an artist in the audience knows the feeling of having a shelf of ideas and books that the world will not see probably. You know, those unpublished manuscripts and those almost extinct ideas, endangered books and ideas. So I have those. And, you know, while the world thinks this is experimental, I've been told that by the structure and the choices I make, I am actually a little more experimental than this. So I hope once I establish myself as a name, I can publish the other works that I have written. This is all part of my grand plan.
Okay, we're looking forward to
thank
that.
you.
And I think this is already quite stunning for a first novel because it's so vast in scope. There are 4 large chapters, and they're all set in different locations with interconnected characters leading through the chapters. But I think what's even more interesting than the characters is the scope beyond the human world. Like the vision in which you, it's also about mountains, about ghosts, the moon, the sun, and all in such a beautiful language. I found this really impressive.
Thank you.
I must-
You know, while on the subject of how getting it published and the books, I struggled to get this book published in India. But once it did, it picked up really quickly. But when I was trying to get it published, the biggest publisher in India kept giving me this feedback that they would publish only the first novella as a book. They gave me the same feedback 3 times. And because though they couldn't critique the language or the style, it didn't fit their idea of what a story is. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I can somehow understand this because the first part is a little bit more character focused, and then the novel becomes really interesting after that, in my opinion. When it opens up and gets so broad and massive, you get like, wow, this was only the tip of the iceberg. And then, but we are going to hear a short passage now from the beginning to give everyone who hasn't read the book yet. You can later buy it outside if you want to read the whole book, which I recommend. But just to give you a little bit of a taste of the sound. So Shubhangi is first going to read the first page in English,
Yes.
and then Milena is going to continue from the German translation.
Thank you. So the novel begins in the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean in the 1940s, where India has just recently gained independence. Silence on a tropical island is the relentless sound of water. The waves, like the sound of your breathing, never leave you. For a fortnight now, the gurgle and thunder of clouds has drowned out the waves. Rains drum on the roof and skid over the edge, losing themselves in splashes. Simmer, whip, thrum, and slip. The sun is dead, they tell you. Seeded in the sounds is an elemental silence, the quietness of mist and the stillness of ice. The newly married Girija Prasad and Chanda Devi have resigned to their fate, strangers in a bedroom damp with desire and flooded with incipient dreams. And Girija Prasad dreams furiously these days, for the rains are conducive to fantasies and unscientific truth. One night, when the downpour suddenly stops, it wakes him up. His ears had adjusted to the tropical cacophony like a spouse to a snoring partner. Rising from a wet dream, he wonders, what happened? Who left the room? He peeps down from his queen-size bed to Chanda Devi's rustic mattress on the floor, where she sleeps facing the open window instead of him. Aroused, He gazes at the curves of her silhouette in the darkness. When the two of them were united for several births by walking around the sacred fire 7 times during their wedding ceremony, she followed his footsteps meekly, firm in her conviction that destiny had brought them together once again in a new avatar. Yet, in this avatar, he would have to find a place in her heart again. Until then, she informed him on the first night, I will make my bed on the ground.
Stille ist auf einer Tropeninsel das unablässige Rauschen des Wassers. Die Wellen sind, wie der eigene Atem, immer da. Seit 2 Wochen schon werden die Wellen übertönt vom Gluckern und Grollen der Wolken. Regen trommelt aufs Dach, strömt über die Kante, klatscht in die Tiefe. Prasselt, peitscht, tropft und klatscht. Die Sonne ist tot, heißt es. In dem Rauschen ruht die Saat einer elementaren Stille. Lautlos wie Nebel, starr wie Eis. Girija Prasad und Chandra Devi sind frisch vermählt und haben sich in ihr Schicksal gefügt. Als Fremde in einem Schlafzimmer, das schwül ist vom Begehren und überflutet von Träumen. Denn in diesen Tagen träumt Girija Prasad mit aller Heftigkeit. Regen beflügelt die Fantasie, das ist Tatsache, wenn auch unbewiesen. Als der Regen eines Nachts abreißt, wird er wach. Seine Ohren hatten sich an die tropische Geräuschkulisse gewöhnt, wie Eheleute an das Schnarchen von der anderen Bettseite. Er schreckt aus einem feuchten Traum und fragt sich, was passiert ist. Wer ist aus dem Zimmer gegangen? Von seinem Doppelbett schielt er zu Chandra Devis einfacher Matratze auf dem Boden, wo sie nicht ihm, sondern dem offenen Fenster zugewandt liegt. In der Dunkelheit lässt er erregt den Blick über ihre Kurven wandern. Bei der Hochzeitszeremonie hatten sie 7-mal das heilige Feuer umrundet, waren mehrere Leben lang vereint gewesen und sie war seinen Schritten bereitwillig gefolgt, fest davon überzeugt, dass beide ein weiteres Mal in wiedergeborener Gestalt in einem neuen Avatar zusammengeführt würden. Doch in diesem Leben würde er den Weg zu ihrem Herzen erst noch finden müssen. Bis dahin, hatte sie ihm in der ersten Nacht eröffnet, richte ich mich auf dem Boden ein. Sie ist hellwach, verstört von den jenseitigen Schreien. Es ist der Geist einer Ziege. Der Geist hat zahllose Sphären hinter sich gelassen und wandert nun auf ihrem Dach umher. Jetzt haben die rastlosen Hufen ihn bis unter das geöffnete Fenster getragen und Schuldgefühle strömen ins Zimmer und in ihr Gewissen. »Hörst du das?« fragt Chandra Devi. Sie spürt seinen Blick im Rücken. »Was denn?« »Die meckernde Ziege da draußen.« Seine nutzlose Erektion verabschiedet sich. Nun ist er geistig ganz bei Chandra Devi und dem Dilemma, vor das sie ihn stellt. »Hier ist keine Ziege«, erwidert er resigniert. Sie richtet sich auf. Das Meckern ist lauter geworden, als wollte es dem unbedarften Ehemann ausrichten lassen. »Du hast mir mein Leben genommen, aber mein Nachleben nimmst du mir nicht, du Fleischfresser.« »Sie steht direkt vorm Fenster«, sagt seine Frau zu ihm. »Hast du Angst vor ihr?« »Nein.« »Bedroht dich die Ziege?« »Nein.« »Dann könntest du sie vielleicht ignorieren und weiterschlafen.« Er hatte solltest statt könntest sagen wollen, doch ihm fehlt der Mut zur Strenge. Seine Frau, so viel hat er begriffen, reagiert auf Argumente oder Zwang ungehalten. Eigentlich reagiert sie auf beinahe alles ungehalten. Wäre sie nur nicht so attraktiv, dann könnte er sie ignorieren und weiterschlafen. »Wie kannst du nur schlafen?« fragt sie. »Du hast diese unschuldige Kreatur massakriert, ihr Fleisch klein gehackt, mit Zwiebeln und Knoblauch gebraten und dann aufgegessen. Zurückgelassen hast du nur die rastlose Seele, die nun unser Haus heimsucht.« Würde er tatsächlich von den Seelen aller ihm verzehrten Tiere heimgesucht, dann wäre sein Haus eine Mischung aus Zoo und Stall und man könnte darin weder treten, geschweige denn schlafen. Doch das kann der sanftmütige Girija Prasad nicht sagen. 2 Monate ist er nun verheiratet und hat sich mit der blühenden Fantasie seiner Frau arrangiert. Stur hofft er, dass solches Verhalten auf ihre Vorstellungskraft und nicht auf eine psychische Erkrankung zurückgeht. Seiner ungeborenen Kinder und der zukünftigen gemeinsamen Jahrzehnte willen verkündet er: »Wenn du dann besser schlafen kannst, esse ich kein Fleisch mehr.« Und so wird der Fleischesser Girija Prasad zum Vegetarier, was seine Frau und auch ihn selbst sehr überrascht. Für ein paar Stunden Nachtruhe verabschiedet er sich ein für alle Mal von Lamm-Biryani, Rindersteak und sogar Rührei. Sobald es dämmert, steigt sie aus dem Bett. Sie geht in die Küche, um ihm ein opulentes Frühstück zuzubereiten. In ihren Bewegungen liegt eine neue Lebhaftigkeit und unter ihrem Schweigen lauert ein Lächeln. Da nun das Töten ein Ende hat, ist es Zeit, mit Aloo Parathas die weiße Flagge zu hissen. 2 Stunden später setzt sie ihm den Teller vor und fragt: Wie sind Sie? Mit einem Mal ist Girija Prasad verunsichert, obwohl es eigentlich keinen Grund gibt. Endlich scheint die Sonne. Seine Frau hat ihm zum ersten Mal Frühstück gemacht und war sogar so kühn, ihm eine Serviette über den Schoß zu breiten. Sie streift seine Schultern, haucht warmen Atem auf seine Haut. Er agiert nach dem Trost von in Fett gebratenem Fleisch. Doch auf seinem Teller ist davon nichts zu finden. Und, wie sind Sie? Fragt sie noch einmal. Wer? Fragt er verwirrt. Die Parathas. Ach, wunderbar. Sie lächelt und schenkt ihm Tee nach. Chanda Devi, die Hellsichtige. Sie fühlt mit den Geistern und schätzt die wortkarge Gesellschaft der Bäume. Sie spürt seine unausgesprochenen Begierden durchaus, doch sie weiß, dass er besser daran tut, dem Fleisch abzuschwören. Alles Fleisch ist so vergänglich wie unzuverlässig, insbesondere im Vergleich mit dem Pflanzenreich. Chanda Devi hat alles gesehen, sogar die Ströme von Blut, die eines Tages aus ihrem Körper fließen werden. Dieses Wissen macht sie standhaft. Es macht sie zu einer anspruchsvollen Ehefrau. Vor seinem Aufbruch nach Oxford hatte Girija Prasad seine Heimat Allahabad noch nie allein verlassen. Während der 4-tägigen Reise mit Pferdekutschen, Fähren und einem Zug, bevor er endlich nach England einschiffte, hatte er sich von vielem getrennt. Gläsern voll mit Eimgemachten und Geh-Parathas, die wohl ein Menschenleben überdauert hätten. Bildern ausgewählter Gottheiten sowie seiner Familie, darunter ein Porträt seiner Mutter, das er selbst gemalt hatte. Zwar hatte er es als Erleichterung empfunden, die Götter hinter sich zu lassen. Insbesondere Rama, den pflichtbewussten Sohn, der ohne guten Grund seine Frau verlassen hatte, und den Baba vom Flussufer, der eigentlich gar kein Gott war, sondern bloß ein seniler, ausgemergelter Mann. Doch sich des Porträts seiner Mutter zu entledigen, ohne einen Zusammenbruch zu erleiden, war ihm unmöglich erschienen. Doch dieser Zusammenbruch würde ihn ebenso ereilen, wenn er, Ozeane entfernt, ständig auf ihr Gesicht starren würde. Um die Trennung zu bewältigen, musste er ein neues Leben beginnen, und zwar ein radikal anderes. Beim bloßen Gedanken daran bekam er schon Hämorrhoiden. Übers endlose Meer treibend geriet er in eine Muschelspirale der Stille. Totgeborene Tränen manifestierten sich als hartnäckige Verstopfung. Als versierter Pflanzenarchivar hatte Girija Prasad kiloweise Flohsamenschalen für genau diesen Anwendungszweck dabei. Zudem befanden sich in seinem Gepäck getrocknetes Königsbasilikum, Nehmblätter, Ingwer, Kurkumapulver, Zimtrinde und zerstößender Pfeffer zur Behandlung weiterer körperlicher Leiden. Bei seiner Ankunft in Dover hielten ihn die Zollbeamten für einen Gewürzschmuggler. Gleich an seinem ersten Tag am Blimey College in Oxford wurde Girija Prasad Varma von den mit Hindi-Namen unvertrauten Dozenten Varma getauft. Noch am Abend seiner Ankunft trank er zum ersten Mal Alkohol und brach auch das generationenalte Tabu, etwas zu sich zu nehmen, das Jota war, verunreinigt durch den Mund eines anderen. Als der gewaltige Bierhumpen unter den Erstsemestern herumgereicht wurde, stand er vor der Wahl, offenen Herzens auf die neue Kultur zuzugehen oder ewig an der Schwelle zu versauern. Auf seinem Schreibtisch standen keine Porträts oder Gottheiten, die ihn hätten tadeln können. Am nächsten Morgen probierte er zum ersten Mal ein Ei, stieß das salzige gelbe Rund mit der Gabel an und beobachtete, wie es bebte. Bald würde er Geschmack daran finden, wie vielschichtig und unvorhersehbar das Leben war. 5 Jahre später kehrte Girija Prasad Varma, der erste indischstämmige Commonwealth-Stipendiat, mit einer Doktorarbeit nach Indien zurück, die mit 2 Worten in seiner Muttersprache schloss: Jai Hind. Seinem Doktorvater erklärte er die Bedeutung mit: Es lebe die indische Nation. Auf Geheiß des jungen indischen Premierministers wurde er 1948, im Jahr der Unabhängigkeit, mit dem Aufbau des Forstamts auf den Andamanen betraut.
Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Wow. In this first scene, we get to know Girija Prasad and Chanda Devi, and we learn that that she does not speak English, but talks to trees and sometimes also to ghosts. Well,
Yes.
he's a botanist. He has been educated in Oxford, so at the heart of the British Empire's knowledge system.
Yes.
He has been trained in how to name plants and how to do analytical thinking and so on. And to me, at first, they seemed like opposite. They seem to represent opposite ways of knowing and approaching the world. Did you construct them in that way, or do you also see them like this, like different ways of approaching the world?
Firstly, I was also following this in English, like sort of. So thank you. And sorry, before I answer the question, it struck me that since we've spoken about Blimey College in Oxford, so the British have a long history of renaming cities and people and surnames in my country. So I was just being mischievous and I renamed this college in Oxford to Blimey because that's what it sounded like to me, I'll be honest. And one old critic in Scotland got really upset. He wrote a stinking review and he mentioned this. How can you change the name of a college in Oxford? I was just giggling, like, did this gentleman not get the irony of, what just happened here?
Of your writing back, in a sense.
Yes. I mean, like, all the names changes. So, yes, I mean, when I heard this word, it reminded me of that.
And what's the actual name of the college?
I think it's Balliol or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Someone in the audience knows.
Yes. A lot of names in my head got confused. Yes, sorry. So your question of...
So my question was
yes.
Is he a representative of this, the empire's knowledge system, the way of approaching the natural world, whereas she is a representative of a different approach to knowledge?
To be honest, both these parts exist within me, and I think they exist within all of us. Even the empire exists within me. Like, for example, in the Andaman Islands, the Indians are the new colonizers. We are repeating that cycle of wiping out the natives out there. So these are aspects that sit within all of us. Observation versus education, or say, intuition versus research, and science versus spirituality is something I'm often asked about. But this big versus or the conflict that is literally a conflict that is created probably by society or in our heads, but I don't view it as a conflict. So to me, these two people, that's why this uneasy relationship into falling in love is an exploration of that. Yes, I feel it's important to have an open mind more than, the conflict exists because we are probably so rigid. Because I feel like the history of rationality is also irrational in so many parts. And so I'm very excited also to be in Berlin because I mentioned to you of Alfred Wegener, who is the father of the continental drift theory, and he was born in Berlin. And he came up with this theory in the 1920s or 30s. But he was called a heretic. He was denounced from the scientific community, and it was called geofantasy. And he came up with this theory of continental drift by observing ice melting in a puddle in Greenland. But the scientific community was offended because how can continents move? How can new land be created? So I think it's most apt here was a person who was had a truly open mind and actually was beyond, was a trailblazer. So
you even said to me that Girija Prasad is like a Wiedergänger of Wegener. It's like a
revenant.
It is. I've modeled him on that, to have a truly open mind, because even when he discovers that his wife talks to trees rather than ridicule her, he asks her to ask the tree, what does she think, what does it think about his, experiments, and what does the tree think about his work as a botanist. So to me, that's a truly open person saying, okay, I'll give you that. What is the feedback, critical feedback I can get? So,
and
yes.
this drift theory is also tied to the location in which the first chapter is set, because the Andaman Islands are in a seismographically...
All the stories are linked to the continental drift theory. When I started to write, my dream was to set all the stories on a tectonically active fault line. A fault line is a crack on Earth, and we have a very big crack running through our subcontinent. It has given rise to these islands, which I would tell you to imagine as mountains poking out of the ocean. Then it goes under the Indian Ocean and it comes up as Myanmar. And then it takes the form of all these various mountain chains, Himalayas in the north, and it continues. So all these places are linked by the fault line. And they're all, as a result, seismically active.
That's so fascinating. You've also mentioned to me that you had a scholarship in
East
Norwich.
Anglia.
Yeah, at the University of East Anglia. And when you were there to write and research a little bit, you also listened into geology classes.
So I didn't sit in the Department of Creative Writing. I sat in the Department of Environmental Sciences, and I sat for the geology courses, and I befriended all the scientists. I loved absorbing everything. So exactly, my inspiration actually comes from a lot of the natural world and the natural sciences. And literally, how can I use these as ways of telling a story and understanding life? In nature, there tends to be a cycle. Water or the rocks tend to follow a cycle. They don't follow this life, death, beginning, middle, end generally. So how do I use this to look at the world differently and tell a different story?
And you've also told me that you used different archives, and you deliberately did so, not just published works in libraries, but you also went to some remote villages and checked out their local bookstores and which books in translation they had or small editions.
So for 7 years, when I had this idea of setting the stories on the fault line, I had this crazy idea of going and living in these places and working in these places and discovering the story in these places. And that's what I tried to do. So when I did actually reach, say, the Andaman Islands or Myanmar, firstly, for these 7 years, I did not read any work written in English. I read only works in translation. And I also tried to pick a lot of regional publications or bookshops which only have, say 5 copies of something left. I also tried to view human beings as books and just listen very carefully, because a lot of these stories are not documented. For example, when I went to Myanmar, they did not even have mobile phones. And while the rest of the world had 4G, they had like 0G. And I was searching for a particular moment in history, which is a political amnesty given in 1971 to some of the political prisoners. It wasn't there on Google. I had heard about it from a refugee that I had interviewed in Delhi, and I went in search of that. So, it's tough to believe, but there are parts of the world which Google knows nothing of. There are villages that exist and roads that exist that are not on Google Maps. And there are stories, like, for example, when I go to a village or when I go to a small place, the women are not considered knowledgeable enough, to be historians, or no one asks the children things. So, but because, firstly, I am also a woman, it became easier for me to access all these routes and not just go by the dominant route. So, which is also how we have earthworms and centipedes as characters, or geckos. To me, they're as important as, a military general or something. So
yeah, there's really an equality in the way you represent all these different creatures,
yes.
and also ghosts. So how do ghosts fit into this natural world,
yes.
into this vision?
So firstly, I often tell myself this, that I'm lucky to be a writer, because as a writer, my vulnerability is my superpower, or it's my strength. All the things that make me so human are the ones that I use. They are my, the skills that I carry. So I didn't intend to have ghosts, but I was in India, if there is an old house, especially if it's a British guest house, it comes with a resident ghost story and a ghost. And I was there during the monsoon season because it was the cheapest season to be there in. And I was writing, and there was a big cyclone, and there was no electricity, and I was alone for 3 days. And all the ghost story started, really freaking me out then. Like, at that point, it doesn't matter if you believe in ghosts or not. It doesn't matter. I was still scared. So I was trying to write my book, and the ghosts started showing up on like page number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 because they were playing on my subconscious. And I realize now that I was also making my peace with the ghosts by writing about them. And then I wondered, if one can see the ghost of a human being, why can't we see the ghosts of animals? And then if we can see the ghosts of animals, why can't we see the ghosts of extinct animals and the elements? So then it became a literary device that helped me explore deep time, go into the deep past of the planet, and bring in various other non-human voices. I also have the ghost of an ocean. And so if one looks at the Indian subcontinent geographically, it was all underwater at one point of time. It was the Tethyan Ocean till this big island called India came and banged into Asia. So then it makes me think that, what we consider land was actually water for a longer time. Does it also have a memory? Do lands have memories? Do they have daydreams? I just started exploring it.
Yeah, at one point, Girija Prasad also says that if a human body is more than the combination of its flesh and bones, then why can't an ocean be more than that?
Yes.
Why can't it have a soul? And that completely makes sense if you start to think about it, in my opinion.
And fiction allows us to open ourselves in that way, It's like it's very, disarming. If I ask you journalistically this question, your answer may be different. But fiction allows us to daydream and think of possibilities.
Your work has sometimes been labeled magical realist. I know that many writers don't like this because it seems to put them in a certain category.
Yes.
But it comes from the Latin American literature, from the Nobel Prize winner Gabriel Garcia Marquez said that we need, in Latin America, we need a certain form of writing to capture our unique reality. So it's a way of dealing with a lush natural environment with a lot going on. So does this concept resonate with you, or do you not like it that much?
It's always important to question any kind of label, especially in my field. So magical realism has now been co-opted. It's almost like an easy way to look at literature from some countries. And it neatly compartmentalizes the politics as a post-colonial politics. Whereas I'm trying to explore the politics of nature. I don't want to say the politics of nature, but the politics behind the way we treat nature and the planet. I don't even want to say nature, maybe planet. So how do I acknowledge that? Something I often say is, when publishers call this experimental, it is ironic that one of the oldest ways of telling stories is now considered experimental, because the fault line is at least 15 million years old, whereas political borders are... The oldest political border in India is as old as my father. It's almost 80 years old. But that still somehow curtails our imagination and our stories work within that format. So I find it sad that this is called experimental now. And by viewing it as magical realism, we are not giving ourselves the chance to explore these other aspects of it. Then there's also climate fiction, but that I again feel is a very westernized, inhabited by Westerners genre right now.
Maybe it's more longing of the readers in the publishing world to have these labels than of the writers.
Yes, I'm just doing my job by questioning it.
All right, let's hear another passage from the novel, Milena. It's from the second part, and we're going to hear the backstory of Mary. Mary is the housewife of Girija and Chanda Devi, and I think that's also something very interesting.
Sorry, not housewife.
Housemaid.
Housemaid. Oh,
Housemaid.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
My
House
mistake.
help? Maybe house help. Or,
house helper.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think that's also very interesting that the novel is not so much going down the family tree of the couple we meet in the beginning, but it branches out further to, for instance, Mary's story, who has been living with them, and we hear about her son Plato, who's a communist activist and has therefore been imprisoned.
Yes.
And we hear a little bit from her backstory.
Die Briten und die Japaner hatten die Inseln verlassen. Die indischen Herrscher brachten etwas Neues mit. Etwas, das auf dem Festland seit Jahrhunderten gedieh und weitaus bezeichnender für die junge Republik war als die dreifarbige Flagge. Armut. Scharen von Geflüchteten kamen aus Ostpakistan über den Golf von Bengalen auf die Inseln. Mit jedem Tag wurden es mehr. Ohne ein Auskommen, um ihr Leben zu bestreiten und ohne eine Kolonialmacht oder einen Zyklon, denen man die Schuld geben konnte, wucherte die Armut wie Unkraut. Rosemary war im 7. Monat schwanger. Sie arbeitete auf dem Feld, verkaufte, was sie entbehren konnte und nährte ihren wachsenden Bauch. Der Burmese trank in Erwartung. Ab und zu brachte er etwas Essbares mit nach Hause. Mangos, Seebrassen, Geflügel, Ananas. Sie war dankbar für alles. Dann blieb der Burmese 3 ganze Tage lang verschwunden. Er hatte das Herumsitzen satt und hatte sich an die Küste aufgemacht, um zu fischen. Eines Morgens kehrte er mit einem Sack auf dem Rücken zurück. Darin war eine lebende Schildkröte, über 20 Kilo schwer. Die erste ansehnliche Menge Fleisch, die er in diesem Monat nach Hause gebracht hatte. Mary strahlte. Ein so großes Tier würde 2 Wochen reichen, wenn man das Fleisch gut einteilte. Sie borgte sich einen Metalleimer, der groß genug war, damit die Schildkröte hineinpasste, und stellte ihn in die Ecke. Eines nach dem anderen trennte sie die Beine ab. Sie verzehrten pro Tag nur eines. Gewissenhaft fütterte sie die Schildkröte und versorgte ihre Wunden. Nur so würde das Fleisch frisch bleiben. Eines Morgens, nachdem sie den blutigen Eimer ausgeleert und mit frischem Wasser befüllt hatte, beging Rosemary den Fehler, dem Tier ins Gesicht zu sehen. Der Schildkröte standen Tränen in den Augen. Am Nachmittag tötete sie die Schildkröte. Das Fleisch verzehrten sie in nur 10 Tagen. Am Ende blieben bloß die Knochen übrig, die sie im Freien trocknete. Als der 8. Monat sich näherte, spürte Rosemary den Hunger mit einer Heftigkeit, dass ihr schwindelig wurde. Ihr Rücken konnte es mit dem Gewicht des hungrigen Kinds kaum aufnehmen. In ihrer Verzweiflung stampfte sie eines Vormittags die Schildkrötenknochen zu einer Paste. Sie kochte die Paste mit Tomaten und aß sie. Als sie ihren schiefen Körper über den Hof schleppte, entzündete die Sonne in ihr einen Kopfschmerz. Sie setzte sich in eine Zimmerecke und presste die Hände an die Stirn, als wäre sie eine Bombe, die jeden Moment hochgehen könnte. Als der Burmese abends nach Hause kam, bemerkte er nicht, dass etwas nicht stimmte. In der Küche herrschte Chaos, es war nicht aufgeräumt und die Hängematten waren nicht aufgestellt. Seine Frau, sonst ein Wirbelwind, hockte in der Ecke und fasste sich an verschiedene Körperteile, als drohten sie ihr abzufallen. Nichts davon schien ihn in seinem Palmweinrausch von Bedeutung. Grinsend ließ der Burmese an der Tür seinen Stoffbeutel fallen und trat mit übertrieben ausholenden Schritten ein. Weder sah Rosemary auf, noch begrüßte sie ihn. »Frau, trag deinem hart arbeitenden Mann auf«, sagte er. »Es gibt nichts.« »Aber ich habe Hunger. Ich habe heute hart gearbeitet.« »Dann koch dir selbst etwas.« Der Burmese unterbrach seinen Rundgang ums Zimmer. In 6 Jahren Ehe hatte seine Frau ihm stets die Mahlzeiten serviert, auch wenn es bloß Schleimsuppe oder Ananas gab. »Trag mir auf«, befahl er. »Nein.« Wie bei einem Volkstanz, dessen Bewegungen beiden vertraut waren, begannen die Schläge. Er ohrfeigte sie, sie wandte den Kopf ab. Das war für ihn das Zeichen, die Intensität zu erhöhen, also trat er sie. Der Schmerz betäubte Rosemary. Er begann in ihrem Schoß und rauschte durch ihre Blase, ihren Rücken, ihre Beine. »Tritt nicht nach deinem Kind«, sagte sie. »Sag einem Vater nicht, wie er sein Kind zu behandeln hat. Es sei denn, es ist gar nicht mein Kind.« Es beschämte den Burmesen, seine Frau als Hure zu bezeichnen, also sprach er es laut aus. »Du Hure«, schrie er. Er trat ihr in die Hüfte. Das Baby trat im Bauch. Außerstande, den Schmerz zu ertragen, streckte Rosemary den Arm aus und griff nach dem Reisstampfer, der in der Nähe lag. Sie hatte Bilder von Fischen und Fröschen hineingeschnitzt, und wie auch beim Körper ihres Mannes erkannten ihre Finger jede Vertiefung und jede Furche. Der Burmese hob das Bein, um sie noch einmal zu treten, und sie traf seinen Knöchel mit dem Reisstampfer. Er stürzte, tanzte die Rolle des Dämonen. Er krümmte sich vor Schmerz. Rosemary, die Siegerin, erhob sich. Sie ging zu ihrer behelfsmäßigen Küche und durchsuchte ihre Waffen. Dann ging sie geradewegs zu ihm zurück, beugte sich über ihn und schnitt ihm die Jugularvene am Hals auf, genau wie beim Schlachten von Geflügel, Schweinen und Hunden. Die Schläge hörten auf, der Rhythmus kam zum Erliegen, die Zeit stand still. Rosemary sah zu, wie das Blut aus seinem Körper strömte. Sie legte sich neben ihn und hielt sein Gesicht in den Händen. Sie sah, wie seine Augen weiß wurden. Wie er zuckte auch sie, zitterte und kam zum Erliegen. Langsam wich das Beben einer schwachen Wärme. Sie zählte seine letzten Atemzüge, 4 flache in rascher Abfolge. Alle 3, Mann, Frau und Kind im Bauch, verbrachten die Nacht mit seinem Blut getränkt.
Thank you, Milena. This is such a violent scene, and it's also quite a violent chapter. Like
What is this?
This was the scene in which Mary is cutting up and killing the turtle.
Oh, okay.
And this scene occurs in a chapter where we also learn about the torture of Mary's son Plato. And we also learn about how Mary is being beaten by her husband, who himself is being maltreated by soldiers. And I was wondering if this was a deliberate choice to put these different types of violence side to side, if you see it as a kind of a continuum, like people being violent with each other, but also with non-human creatures.
It is a continuum. I do view it as a continuum. This metaphor for fault line, which is also a place of geological violence, because land comes up and land goes down, and it leads to earthquakes and mountains and a lot of turmoil. I think it helped me also explore the various kinds of violence within our lives, political forms of violence, domestic, poverty, killing animals, all of it. I don't know if I made a deliberate choice to explore it, but how can I, speak about colonization without maybe speaking about domestic abuse? How can I speak about animals being killed without speaking about these bigger narratives? I mean, to me, I don't view it as big and small, but just a continuum.
It also helps to go beyond a black and white image of the world, because
Yes.
it all seems to be interconnected. And
Yes.
in this way, also an ecological vision, like that the planet is also like a living being, like this.
Yes.
Did you come across this Gaia hypothesis by James Lovelock, like the Earth as a living being?
I didn't come across his, but I reached the same conclusion by just, observing when we sit on a beach or when we sit in a forest or we take a hike. I think many of us, I feel the reason why the book resonates with readers is somewhere we have all reached a similar conclusion that there is a larger force at play and we can't name it yet, or we can't, it doesn't fit into our idea of intelligence and conscious, but there is a larger force at play, and probably there's someone looking out for us too. I don't know.
That
Yes.
would be a kind of solace, because I was also wondering if with all this violence in your text, there's also so much beauty, and so many reviewers have also commented on the beautiful language. So in a sense that it has a redemptive quality. It's not only violent and horrible.
Yes, as trite as it sounds, but love is also a force of nature in the book. It is there behind even the actions of violence, I would like to believe. There is compassion and forgiveness also where there is violence. And there is this, I think what I view solitude to be the solitude of a whole planet. Like, it's not loneliness. I think that is what it is. There's also beauty to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And there's also a beauty in the point of view of the text, I think, in the close observations and the small details. You've already shown us the drawings on the cover that reflect very much how the text is written. It contains so many nice small details nestled inside. And we were talking before that about there's the Bechtel test for
Yes.
the representation of female characters in films, how feminist the vision of a work of fiction is. And you said it would be really nice to have a biodiversity test
Yes.
for a text.
Yes. Like I find it interesting when I read books. I sometimes ask myself, do I know what the topography is like? Do I know what the trees are like? What is the altitude? Because it is possible to write a beautiful book without any of these details, or to mention even a single insect. So there are these little facts that always, get me thinking. To every human being, there are 1 billion insects in this planet. Now, can I write a story embracing this diversity instead of just annihilating it? Yes.
I would say let's, because we're already approaching the end of our conversation, and so as not to end with the killing of the turtle, but with something else, Milena is going to read another very short passage.
Yes. Wir sind jetzt im Himalaya. Um zu den Gletschern zu gelangen, muss man den Haarnadelpass im Südwesten des Blutaprikosentals überqueren. Heiße Quellen sind die ersten Naturwunder von vielen auf der unbewohnten Seite des Haarnadelpasses. Die Rückstände des Wassers haben den Boden mit leuchtenden Flecken von hellem Schwefelgrün, Oxidrot, Natronweiß und Ureagelb überzogen, wodurch man das Gefühl hat, man würde über ein riesiges, von Wandermönchen gemaltes Fresko laufen. Die Farben ziehen Steinböcke und Murmeltiere an, und zu passender Jahreszeit kommen auch Schwarzhalskraniche aus dem Himmel herab, denn sie haben die heißen Quellen zu ihrer Brutstätte auserkoren. An ihrem Rand bauen die Kraniche Nester, die so stattlich sind wie Ameisenhügel. Seit Jahrhunderten glauben Heiler an die stärkenden Kräfte der Quellen. Einmal stellte sich ein Händler mit gebrochenem Herzen in den kräftigen Stahl eines Geysirs, und heraus sprangen in seiner Stadt ein Hirsch und ein Reh. Die Scherben seiner selbst waren zu neuem Leben erwacht und existierten nun als unabhängige, unzertrennliche Wesen, genau wie er es sich für sich und seine Liebste vorgestellt hatte. Doch das Wasser kann den Kummer nur verwandeln, heilen kann es ihn nicht. Es war einmal eine tibetische Prinzessin, die zu den Quellen kam, um ihre entzündete Haut zu behandeln. Obwohl sie in dunklen, geschlossenen Räumen lebte, schlossen sich die Wunden nicht. Nach einem Sprung in die Quelle war nicht nur ihre Haut heil, ihr wuchs auch dickes, braunes Haar am ganzen Körper und sie bildete eine Fettschicht aus, die sie vor der Sonne schützte. Nun war sie eine Bärenfrau. Bevor irgendjemand sie einfangen konnte, flüchtete sie in die Wildnis.
Thank you. Milena, what was it like to translate passages like this? There are a lot of names of different species. Did you have to do a lot of research, and what was it like to...
Yes, quite a lot. I mean, you just discussed this, so the botanical aspect was quite heavy in this book. My great luck as a translator, because I often counted this, is my best friend is a biologist.
Oh.
So she studies and researches forests, and so I always can ask her about all the taxonomical questions. And so she helped me quite a bit with those parts. And for everything else, yeah, it was a huge pleasure because all the 4 parts are very different language-wise. They have a different flow. And this last one, which I especially like, which is settled in the Himalayas, has a very musical element to it, I would say. And that was great fun, finding that flow. And sometimes it even rhymes a little bit. It's very, very beautiful.
And Shubhangi told me that you requested some photos from her.
Which I'm sorry I didn't end up sending you, but...
Oh, yeah.
You didn't mention that.
Yeah, what was that?
I was telling Simone that you have a visual way of translation, because many of your questions were related to some confusion about visualizing something, not just the language. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I always try to picture it the way you might have pictured it. And so whenever I felt like I didn't have a clear picture, I was trying to get that from you.
Well, clearly it shows, because we've got great. I've got a great response to the German translation. So
I'm glad.
Thank you. Yes.
It's really, really a beautiful translation, and it works in itself as it's, I just want to encourage you to go and pick up a copy later, and Shubhangi is going to sign books, I believe. But we have time for some questions from you. We have a microphone available, so don't be shy, ask your questions. It's so amazing that Shubhangi is here all the way from Goa. I mean, I
must thank Annette, my beautiful publisher, Simone, and Milena and Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung for, colliding and combining forces to have me here.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's
very
nice
to have
be.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions or...
Guten Abend, ich bin Noor. Hi, Shubhangi, this is Noor. I'm probably the only Indian in the room apart from you, I guess.
Okay.
Oh, there's another one there. Good.
Oh, and one more. Okay.
Oh, one more. Oh, amazing. So I'm basically here to root for you. And it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
I haven't read your book, honestly.
Okay.
This event just happened quite in a jiffy for me. So someone who recommended me to visit is probably not here right now.
Okay.
But it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting this book session. I have a question.
Yes.
You talked about your struggle with the biggest publisher in India when they gave you a feedback 3 times over. How did you actually get through this specific challenge that you faced when they kind of labeled your novel a certain way and they were not ready to publish? I basically want to know about your obstacle there.
So many obstacles. I think I was telling you last time, Simone, I was telling Simone that, once I finished writing this book, I actually burnt all the notes I had made for 7 years and all the drafts. I had at least more than 20 drafts. And I just burnt it all because I didn't know where it would lead to, but I was prepared that whatever it is, I have let go, success or failure. This is the journey of the book to make. So I took it, very spiritually, not to hang on to the outcome. So when the publisher refused to publish it in a particular way, I wouldn't have liked to see it in any other way either. So I just kept persisting. The second biggest publishing house picked it up. And after that, there was just a chain of events that led to its success. Also, for Indian literature to make it globally, it has to go through England because they are the gatekeepers of English literature. And my book was... again, rejected with a lot of passion, I would say, consistently. But then I changed my agent, who was British, to a Spanish agent who took it to America, where I had a fantastic response. Within just 3 days, I got a lot. It got auctioned. I had multiple offers. And then it came to Europe to so many languages. So I think... I don't know if I overcame the obstacles, but the book made its own journey geographically and found the people who would appreciate it.
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
Thank you.
I'm impressed. I have actually 2 more questions. If everybody in the room allows me, I'm not sure. If you have questions, I can pass on the mic. I have no problem.
Go ahead.
Second question is that why exactly did we choose this cover for the German translation, as I see the turtle?
Is that a question to Annette?
Oh, so, yeah.
Kann ich auf Deutsch antworten? Gut, okay. Das liegt daran, dass die Belletristikreihe des Verlags immer ein ziemlich schlichtes Cover ist, ein grafisches Cover. Deswegen ist es nicht so ausführlich wie die englischsprachige Version. Und wir wählen immer ein Symbol, das möglichst die Geschichte wiedergibt. Und für uns war eben wichtig, dass es ein Tier ist und dass es eine Schildkröte ist. Das liegt daran, dass eine Geschichte in dem Buch tatsächlich, eine Schildkröte tatsächlich in der Geschichte vorkommt und es mein Lieblingstier ist. Also das ist der Grund.
Thank you. But I would require someone to translate that for me.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, I can give a brief summary. So the fiction series always has these rather simple covers, and they always choose a symbol or a symbolic motive to represent the story. And in this case, it had to be an animal because they're so important for the story, and also it had to be a turtle because, first of all, a turtle is part of the story, and it's also the publisher's favorite animal.
And maybe we should mention that the turtle reappears in the novel. It's not just being killed. Yeah. There's also a folk tale about a turtle. That it reappears several times.
There was an incident I shared with Annette. So the book did really well in Sweden. It was a bestseller there. But one of the bookstagrammers, these book bloggers on Instagram, was kind of upset and asked, why should I be interested in a turtle in the Indian Ocean? And that question really stuck with me. So I hope this answers or leads you to your own answer. Yeah.
You had a third question, or? Okay.
I had a third question too, I'm sorry. But I want to know what would be the biggest takeaway for somebody like me who hasn't read your book yet. So what is it that inspired you to write such a story? And if someone is reading it, what would be that one message you want them to take away after they read it?
Probably you'd be the best at answering that.
Oh, I don't know. So, of course, it's impossible to tell because if you could summarize it, I think Shubhangi would have, but you can't. So you have to read the whole thing. But I can probably mention one thing, which is the ending, and I won't give it away, of course. But it ends with the idea that when you have everything and you strip it of everything, then you have an emptiness, and in that emptiness you have the possibility of everything once again. So, and this is maybe one of the concepts that
Thank you.
are here. And
Yes.
that's just, that ending, as I said, I won't read it, I won't give it away, but it's one of the most beautiful things I ever read or translated. So
Thank
And
you.
it makes you restart the novel immediately.
Yes.
I just started again after the end.
Thank you.
More questions?
Why not?
I didn't have the opportunity to read more of the book than the small sample that Amazon Kindle provided me, this 5% that you can just get as a kind of short notice. And I really liked it a lot. And we've heard that I mean, I don't know whether I get it right, that you are that you are writing this story as basically a story of different ways of defining maybe the human nature relationship. I mean, for want of better words, let me use that term, because obviously nature can also humans can be part of nature and so on.
Yes.
But I mean, that's and that really makes it very interesting for me, and I will surely read it very soon. But coming here from the background here of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, of a political foundation, I was wondering, I mean, this is a history also, no? Going over several decades, if I get it right. How does the tortuous politics of South Asia between India, Pakistan, Myanmar, does it come into your book?
It is actually the plot. You know, a lot of politics in Andaman's. The story follows also the story of colonization to a great extent, because that is the biggest reality of the islands. We had, as you may know, the Andaman Islands were the Guantanamo Bay for the British Empire. So those are where the ghosts come from, actually, and the Japanese soldiers. In Myanmar, the protagonist is a student revolutionary. Myanmar has a long history of student protests and a very violent suppression of those protests. And I had followed the story through the refugees initially who escape into India. And then I went back to Myanmar. I worked as an undercover reporter there because the government does not give you a visa if you want to write about the country, which I was telling Simone, it helps to be a young woman, because I just said I'm a housewife and no one doubted it. So the work was entirely political there for me. In Nepal, it's about human trafficking. And the book ends in a no man's land in Ladakh, which is it's a very strong criticism of borders and wars and violence, actually. Yes. I mean, that is what I hope, if we look at the planet and if we look at natural features, then it makes complete common sense to not view ourselves in isolation and limited in these schizophrenic ways of identifying just with a country or an ideology.
Just thinking into it. So may I ask how you actually made it into Myanmar under the military regime? I find this quite remarkable. And which year was that?
It was around 10 to 12 years ago. So it was a democracy in transition at that time, before it flipped. But even back then, there were people I interviewed who were imprisoned while during even my time there. I was there for a few months. The biggest inspiration behind that section is No More. He was a man who was, I remember Mr. Ong Thaik. He was as old as my mother, and he used to run a tea shop. So he used to be a medical student when he was arrested in the late 1960s. A lot of the details of torture come from his life, broken teeth and drinking his own urine, etc. Needless to say, he couldn't get, when he came out, he couldn't become a doctor. He just started running a tea shop. And now he's no more. So there's a lot of... I want to do justice to these stories, because for many people, the stories are all that is left right now. But how did I get into these places? I also made it to the Siachen base. Now, this is where my superpower of being viewed as a harmless young woman comes into play. I could say something like I'm a student and get away with it at the, India-Pakistani border. I taught in schools. If I was a 6-foot man, the story would have been very different. But because I'm not, it helped me explore the vulnerabilities and explore another side. In Nepal, they didn't take me seriously enough, which was good in a way because I could see through the hypocrisy of non-profits. There are very strong narratives people want to sell. But because they thought I was just a young Nepali girl, I could actually fit in better. Yeah. Congratulations. Thank you. So in Myanmar, they stopped my husband. When he was also a journalist, they made him sign a letter saying he will not write about the country. But the joke was that I was the one writing and they let me through. Yeah.
We did read your book about 2 years ago in our book club.
Okay.
I spent a long time looking for young Indian women who are writing about environmental topics.
Wow.
Very specific.
Yes. Yes.
And then I made, how many of us? 9 of us? 10 of us read it.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you. My question is, are you working on anything right now?
Yes, I am. As much as my children allow me to, but I am. I am working on another novel and I'm working on short stories also. After this, I wrote a play which is doing quite well back home in Hindi, but I'm also writing.
But you're writing in English, or are you also writing in Hindi, the novel?
The novel I'm writing in English, yes.
And the short stories?
English, the play. Like I was telling you, there's a language of the heart. So Hindi is that. It comes in plays and children's stories. But all this is in English. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. If there are no further questions, I think there will also be some drinks outside, and Shubhangi is going to sign books. And I think if someone has a more...
Well, I have a specific question. Why did you have such a specific... What inspired your unique search?
Over the last few years, when we set up a book club about 4 or 5 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, and I wanted it to be a way of us traveling together without leaving the house, where we could all go and look at the same view, but have different experiences. So that was why the basis of the book club. And we then all realized that we fell into our own, you know how like when you go on holiday with some people and they want to do like city breaks.
Yes.
And then you've got other people who want to go kayaking. And then you've got that one person who's like, I want to make everyone do a 40-kilometer hike. And that's me.
Okay.
And I realized that a lot of what we were doing as somebody I'm half Indian, half Scottish,
Okay.
somebody who's spent a lot of time in nature, but also realizing I'd had a very Western-centric idea of nature writing.
Yeah.
And I was looking deeply for something that had been translated into English, which I could read, that would also have an emphasis on nature and the way that nature was being portrayed by a contemporary writer. I met you and your husband
Okay.
in 2016,
Okay.
very briefly, and we had a 5-minute conversation about
Okay.
this, about what you were working on.
Wow. Excuse me, my pregnancy took my...
It was fine. It was in a club, actually.
Okay.
I met you in a club indeed.
Okay.
And I then did a deep dive
Wow.
looking for,
Okay.
and this book came up. And then I got my family in India to actually read it as well.
Wow, thank you.
No, it's something we told the book club that we were coming here tonight, and it was something that we actually talked about, that there aren't enough contemporary young female writers who are writing from a non-Western-centric viewpoint on nature and the environment and life. So, and one of the things we took away from this book is how much we traveled in it. So,
Thank you.
there we go.
Thank you for sharing this anecdote.
Yes, yes.
Lots of connections in this room.
Yes.
So I would like to thank everyone involved once again. Thank you to the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, to all technicians working tonight, and I think you're all warmly invited to join us for drink outside. And thank you once more to Milena and Shubhangi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And you and Ahmed.